Thanks for joining us for today's webinar, Getting to Yes, How Top Operators Avoid Leasing Mistakes, sponsored by Conversion Logics. I'm Suzanne Silverman, Editorial Director of Multi-Housing News, and I'm here today with Crystal Benegas, Regional Director of Sales for Conversion Logics. We're recording this session and it will be available for later viewing. In addition, we're going to leave some time at the end to answer your questions, but please feel free to submit them at any time during the webinar. We're here today to help you improve the effectiveness of your lead strategy from initial contact to signed lease. Conversion Logics is a marketing technology company that delivers a powerful combination of strategic campaign management, ad creative, lead generation software, and attribution designed to provide marketers, managers, and business owners with scalable and performance-driven marketing solutions that allow them to profitably generate leads, appointments, and sales. Crystal, thanks so much for joining us, and let's get started.
Let's get started. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, we're glad you're here. Our audience is eager to learn how to improve the effectiveness of their digital marketing and lead strategy. One concern we often hear is that they're generating webinar traffic, but the traffic isn't translating into leads or leases. What do you think is contributing to this situation?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Many of our clients actually come to Conversion Logics for this very reason. So we actually have 5 strategies to share that enable communities to increase their lead to lease conversion rate.
Sounds great. So let's go through those strategies.
Yeah, let's. So one of the things that we often hear that I'm sure is a common issue with many of you is we're getting website visitors, but they're not quite qualified yet. So how do we address this point and develop a scalable digital marketing strategy to target the right audience? And the most important thing here is to have the conversation. So have the conversation with your team, have the conversation with your digital provider, with your marketing team. And the first question is, if you're not getting qualified traffic, is how are they not qualified? Are they not qualified financially? Are they not meeting the property qualification standards? Is this because of availability? Do we not have any availability? Are they looking way too far in advance? So a lot of different things can play into the my website visitors are not qualified issue. So what we'll do from there is, one, have that conversation and really kind of break down what it is that are identifying these prospects as unqualified, and then look at our targeting strategies and identify how we can break down our targeting strategies to improve the quality of our traffic. One of those may be better targeting in paid search. Are we pulling in people from the right areas, the right neighborhoods, the right cities? You know, we're in a unique situation right now, and especially within these past couple of years, where we have droves of people moving from different states to, for an example, Texas or Florida, who are getting a lot of out-of-state traffic. So is that your situation? And if so, are we opening up your campaign enough through certain platforms like paid search to be visible to those people? Are they able to find you? Are we honing it in a little bit and going from a state standpoint or out of state standpoint, even to a little bit more local? Are we identifying the right neighborhoods where we can pull qualified traffic from? People who we know are looking for a desirable neighborhood that you may be located in or near, and including that as part of your keyword strategy so they can find you when searching those keywords as well. So it's really important through all of this that, like I said, we have that conversation and identify how we can implement them on several different platforms. Obviously, paid search is one, through those strategies. Another one is going to be through intent-based targeting across your display strategies as well as your social strategies. So asking again the question, are we using things like data-driven display to target by radius and look at how our prospects are searching online, and then being able to take that information and target them with very branded ads that include some of that really great content of, this is where I'm located, look at this great photography of my property, it's attractive, it's enticing for that prospect to want to click on and then drive to your website. Also selecting, how are people finding you on social? We want to ensure that we're not violating any fair housing guidelines, right? But we can still have the conversation of, where are your people working? Where are they located? Are they near a university? And we can identify those interest groups through our social channels and target our prospects that way. So we're serving them a targeted sponsored ad right where they're spending most of their time. And that's their social media and news feed, and then pulling them in to ensure that we're getting you the right traffic to your website. And sometimes it's the content. So as I mentioned, it could be targeting through keywords, it could be through visual aids, and sometimes it is just including the right type of content of, I'm featuring this 1 bedroom, I'm featuring this 2 bedroom. This is currently what I have available if availability is an issue that is deeming your prospects as unqualified, and featuring all of that content across many of these platforms that you may be utilizing to drive in the right people. So it's identifying what is making them unqualified, coming up with the strategy with your digital provider, with your team, to figure out what can I implement, what can I pull away, what can I add, to ensure that we are identifying those qualified and then putting it into play across several different platforms.
Wow, that's a lot of great things to be thinking
Yeah.
about. Some really specific examples on
Yeah,
some
absolutely.
different considerations and things to try.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that's just step one in the strategy, though,
Just step
right? That'll keep you busy for a while pulling all that together. Okay, so once you do all that, then what do you do next?
Yeah. So moving from that, like you said, it is a lot to take in, which is why it really is so important to continuously have that conversation with your marketing team, with your digital marketing provider. So we've generated this traffic and now we're getting the right traffic and they've landed on the website, but then they're not converting. They leave. So how do we identify from all of that the high intent prospects once they've landed on your website? And really, my biggest recommendation there, first and foremost, is move through your website as if you're a prospect. Is it easy to navigate? Can we find the things that our prospects are looking for to self-qualify themselves? Is it easily accessible for them to get to the floor plans page? The apply now button. Is the apply now button linked out to another portal? And if so, is that working? Is the contact us button working and the click to call button working? So making sure all of those functionalities that would identify somebody as a high intent prospect once they've landed on your website are actually working, and then breaking it down from there and looking at these trackable, actionable items like goal completions, or how long are they actually spending on your website, and then how many pages are they looking at once they're there. So being able to break that down and identify those metrics with your team or with your marketing team really allows us to say, okay, I've set up this strategy through my step 1 process. We are doing everything that we can to identify qualified prospects. Now they're here. Are they moving through the process appropriately to become an on-site tour? And then, of course, when they are ready to become an on-site tour and they are ready to take that next step and to kind of cross that bridge and speak to you, are we offering the right modules and tools for them to do so? So even with the right functionality, do they have the opportunity to convert? Are we putting them through a very long and strenuous contact us form rather than an integrated solution that may be one touch or easy for them to navigate through? So putting in things like a schedule genie or a conversion cloud or some type of automation module that lives on your website that allows that prospect to take back the ownership of their leasing journey and offer them the opportunity to connect with you rather than lots of back and forth. Instant connection, right? Instant connection through live chat, instant connection through the capability for them to offer their name, phone number, email address, those, very identifiable LS benchmark questions that we're all looking to gain, making sure we have that ability to do that. And we've seen huge success with this. And just as an example that we can give from our experience, about 3 years ago, we launched our modules called the Conversion Cloud, and we've been able to generate almost 600,000 leads across 800 communities. So it really does offer the testament that your prospects truly are landing on your website and looking for that opportunity to convert through engaging offers, through flexible touring options, through asking the right pre-qualification benefits. But we have to be able to implement those type of modules and tools on our website in order for them to do so.
Okay, great. It's again a lot, some very basic things like just making sure things work,
Yeah.
which is easy to forget, but is common. Technology has glitches, and then
It breaks.
it could be that simple, or you may
Yeah.
need to implement some other things. And I love that idea of getting inside the mind of the prospect. Tell us about your third strategy.
Yeah, so many different steps that we can do, and it really is sometimes going back to basics. So one of the next step within the strategy is moving the traffic and allowing them to reach out. Right, we've given them all these opportunities to land on your website, but how do we personalize the leasing experience to increase our leasing conversion? Something that we hear often now more than ever is leasing automation. And we kind of touched on that through talking through conversion modules and how those live on your website to allow that opportunity. But what if the traffic is reaching out and they're not seeing a response from you, or they're receiving an untimely response from the on-site team? So this really is kind of taking it back to basics throughout the digital marketing journey, throughout the leasing journey, and ensuring again that our teams are set up with additional support and that leasing automation to allow them to do so. Though we may not see the amount of phone calls coming in anymore, our people are reaching out to us via live chat, via scheduling tools, via contact form submissions. So are we set up to react appropriately and timely? Do we have live chat set up in a manner that we're able to address questions like when are you going to have 2 bedrooms available? What about this feature amenity benefit? Can you give me a little bit more information on pricing? And whether that be a chat bot or a live chat able to answer real-time questions, setting those tools up to bridge that gap where there is no lapse in information. Sending in personalized email confirmations, taking the information that they've given us through tools like the Conversion Cloud and saying, Jane Smith obviously sent in her name, phone number, and email address. That's wonderful. But we know she's looking for a 2-bedroom. We know that she wants to bring her furry family member with her. So how are we utilizing that information to get back with her in a timely manner, touch on those heartstrings, and complete that leasing process for her with your community? And sometimes email doesn't do it. Sometimes chat doesn't do it. Sometimes now, in the world that we live in, especially, it's texting, and having the texting capability rather to encourage your prospects to text back and forth with the community. It helps the on-site teams get through responses faster. And it helps the prospect feel like they're engaged and that they can continue the conversation through their phone, mobilely, if they're on their lunch break and they're looking for that opportunity. So going back to the basics and kind of just going back to that follow-up. Am I doing it in a timely manner? Am I doing enough? And do I have the tools to allow me to personalize this follow-up process when the prospect needs me to be available?
Okay, great. Let's move on to the fourth strategy.
Yeah, so we've done all of these things.
All these things, yeah.
And it is a lot. We've done all of these things. And sometimes, we can take a horse to water, but we can't make him drink. So we've gone all the way to the point of touring. Jane Smith, she's come in, she's been targeted through paid search, through social media. She's scheduled her appointment. She's come in for this fabulous tour with your on-site team. but she hasn't leased. It's the day old question, and we see it all the time, but it's really important that, again, continuing the conversation, we find out why. Is our leasing team having the conversation of, was it not the right time for you to move? Do we not have the availability or the amenity that you're looking for? Is it a pricing issue? That allows us to have that conversation with your team as well and identify, is this a moment in time? Is this a group of people in the grand scheme of your digital campaign and your occupancy efforts and your leasing goals? Or is this a trend that we need to identify and kind of take it all the way back to step one and identify some adjustments through your strategy that we can implement? So let's find the right people and go back and reevaluate what it is that may be keeping these people who are kind of not touring. So if you're not being asked a question, or if you're not having the question of occupancy trends, how many leases are you getting per week, traffic versus leases, those are all really good questions to ask to continue the thought process of strategy, because it can look great on paper and we could be driving great qualified traffic to your website, but if they're not leasing once they get there, we need to take a deeper look and find out why. And sometimes that includes going back to the drawing board.
So really, strategies 3 and 4 are both about communication and interaction with the prospect, and making sure you're answering their questions and then getting more information, especially if they're not interested now. I can see how
Right.
that could be so useful to get more information about what they're looking for, so that that they're not a lost prospect. They may
Right.
just need to be reached out to
Yeah,
again.
their timeline may just be different.
Mhm. Great. Okay. And then number 5, what do
Yeah.
we do after all that, or what other situations do we need to address?
Yeah, so this is actually comes on perfect in terms of timeline. So
Mhm.
obviously communication is important when you're running any digital strategy. And we can't implement the right strategy, the right tools, the right platforms without that conversation. And it really is full circle. So they visited your website, your community, but you never hear back from them because they've decided to live somewhere else, or they really just weren't the community for them at that time. Remember that this is all part of the process, and we all go through this, whether it be through seasonality, the slow season, gearing up for the busy leasing season, and re-engaging your prospects back into that leasing funnel and pulling them back in. So different things that we could do with that are email drip campaigns. Are you going back to your previous prospects who, 6 months ago, a year ago, came in as a tour, but they leased somewhere else? Remember that at some point they're going to be up for renewal again. At some point, they're going to be faced with the decision and the timeline of, I need to find a new apartment community. So don't write them off. Pull them back into the leasing funnel. Reach out to them with very branded, insightful information about what your community has to offer at this point in time. And they may have leased somewhere else, but their eyes are still open. So keep that in mind, making sure that your campaign is a full strategy through and through, no matter what time of the year is, because even though you may not be getting the droves of traffic at this time, there's a prospect that at one point was in your funnel and they're going to be set on that journey again. So are your ads up to date? Are you visible in the right places? Are you talking with your digital provider to ensure that the right strategy is in place at the right time? And are you reconnecting with them, utilizing the tools that you're given through a journey visualizer, through Conversion Cloud? I know that Jane Smith may have visited my website in January, but it took her until March to actually become a lease. So it's just really important to remember to not give up, to remember that it is a process and it is a cycle, and that they're always looking. So being visible consistently and making sure that you're always up to date with your messaging is super, super important for that final strategy.
These are all really helpful strategies. Before we continue, I just want to remind everyone in the audience, if you have a question, please go ahead and put it in that Q&A window. We will be opening things up for questions very shortly. In the meantime, though, Crystal, could you give us an example of where all of these strategies were leveraged to increase leases?
Yeah, so we had a community that I actually work with on their digital campaign located out of Florida. And they were in that situation where, we've got the digital campaign live, but we're just not getting the qualified leads, the traffic coming in, they're just not leasing. We hear this too. My comps are getting traffic, but I'm not. Okay, let's have the conversation. So we sat down, we talked, the leasing agents got on the phone, the marketing team got on the phone, the property manager got on the phone. We were all in, we were all ready. What we were able to identify was targeted locations. They were getting a lot of traffic from out of state where their local traffic really was not their audience. And through conversation and through a deep dive in their Google Analytics, through a deep dive through their campaign data, we were able to identify those specific cities and states where their prospects were coming from. So we actually changed our targeting strategies, not just in paid search, but also on social media and display by including the right content, including the right interest groups, including the right keywords, and we were able to target them. So this was a time frame of April through May of 2021. And shortly after these adjustments, I got an email from the team that said, lo and behold, it's worked. And it's such a great, moment when you're able to hear that, and which is why those conversations are so important. But they were able to gain 7 signed leases after collecting 19 guest cards from that adjustment in strategy. So it's important not to write it off when you're having a struggling moment. Have that convo, implement the right strategies with your digital provider, and we're going to do everything that we can to get you on the right path.
Okay, thank you. That's a good example. It's good to hear how this all comes together. Let's step back and look at the bigger picture. When do you recommend a wholesale change in approach versus smaller adjustments to what you've been doing?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. Sometimes all of this really is circumstantial. Every community has their own leasing goals. Whether you're a lease up and you're working on a lease up timeline for a 16-month, 14-month period, or you're a stabilized community that's, looking to maintain and backfill based off of renewals. It sometimes really just comes down to what is your month over month trend? Are we seeing a large dip in occupancy where we do need to go back on the drawing board? Or is it something as simple as, hey, I'm reducing my prices, my comps are getting a lot of traffic. Let's put, sometimes starting price helps putting it on there, rent starting at, or, now offering reduced rents. And that is a simple adjustment that we can implement that can really change the pace of how your prospects are getting to you, how they're finding you, and how they're connecting with you. So it really just does come down to what your current situation is, what are your current trends, and then looking at them from a holistic view, like you mentioned, and going back and making the appropriate adjustments through minor adjustments, sometimes even adding platforms, adding in a social strategy if you don't have one available, adding in a display strategy if you don't currently have that implemented, and ensuring that we're visible on all appropriate platforms.
Okay. Let's turn now to some questions from the audience. And I actually do have another question from the audience that kind of goes along those lines of bigger picture. What's changed in prospects' behavior that necessitates a change in approach now? And I don't know if that has to do with the pandemic, or that's influenced how people look for apartments now, or anything else that's really influenced their behavior.
Yeah, so that's a great question. And to be quite honest with you, a lot has changed. We've lived in an active pandemic, and it kind of seems like it's a revolving door. And through that, we saw the needs of our prospects changed. in 2020, when all of this hit, display, digital, paid search, everything was so necessary to be sure that you were in front of your prospects. Utilizing things like virtual tours when they weren't being utilized before became the need of every community to have available, being able to connect with your prospect in a digital format. We saw ad spend grow so much over 2020. And I think that we thought coming out of that would change and possibly that trend would go down, when in fact we found quite the opposite. We've actually found that ad spend is projected to continue to grow by 50% over the next 4 years. So the pandemic has really changed how our prospects are needing information from us, and it's turned to very digital versus I need a digital campaign because it's a thing to do. Now it's how your prospects are finding you. They were spending more time on social media. They're spending more time on the internet. They became accustomed to having things given to them at their doorstep because they weren't able to leave the house. So how do we meet our prospects now on that journey? And that's going to be through things like video consumption, because they spent more time on YouTube. They spent more time on services like streaming services, Hulu, ESPN, things like that, where they're able to spend their time and still be able to consume information. So we need to be sure that we're meeting them there at those places and on those platforms by implementing video in your social ads. They want the information fast and they want it now. Implementing YouTube campaigns, because as we've seen, that's where they're spending their time. Implementing, CLTV and putting in those ad spaces on the channels that they're already watching and the streaming services that they're already watching. So really, it has not necessarily been how they're finding us. It's more so the expectation and understanding that we need to meet up to those expectations of information at those particular places throughout the prospect's journey.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Another question, a little more about your company specifically. We have somebody wondering about your CRM and what it encompasses and what makes you stand out.
Yeah.
What's different about you?
Sure. So, quite honestly, I came from the multifamily side. I started out as a leasing agent, worked my way through, became a marketing associate with the multifamily company, and Conversion Logics was actually my vendor. And I love to tell this story because it really does come full circle. I was able to work with my rep and able to identify customizable strategies. It was never you need to spend this dollar amount here, though sometimes, depending on your market, it is a conversation that you need to have. But I was never being sold a package. And I fell in love with Conversion Logics as a provider because of that. As a matter of fact, because of that company went on to become a preferred provider with Conversion Logics as well. And that partnership has continued to grow. So one thing that I love about that is, we are not going to sell you what you don't need. We're going to sell you the appropriate strategy. We're going to work with you on the appropriate strategy. We're going to work with you on the right platforms for your property's specific goals, for your property's specific leasing situation, and whatever that may be. To take it a little bit further beyond that and that kind of personalization that we talked about with your prospects, we carry that over to our clients as well, that personalization. And obviously, communication is really important to us, hence the reiteration of communication through all of our strategies and all of the important strategies that we should be doing across the board, no matter your provider. It's having that personalized conversation month over month, week over week, of what's going on with your community, what can we do for you at this moment in time to get you to those leasing goals and achieve what you need to do, whether that be through real-time reporting, the availability to log in and look at your data in the immediate moment, having a a rep, an account manager, somebody that you can connect with when you have a question, that can jump on calls, can jump on ownership calls and client calls, somebody that can really bridge that gap. And then kind of back to that CRM question is having a provider that is able to connect with, the likes of your major lead management systems, like your Real Pages and your Entradas. It's great that we can do all of these things and that we can capture all of these leads and we have all of these tools available. But if we can't connect with the right programming and the right systems, it's going to make it that much more difficult for your on-site teams to work through that prospect information. So communication, personalization, and then of course, integration. It's a lot of shuns there, but really, in my opinion, that's really what sets us apart. It's why I, decided to take my journey on the other side and become an employee of Conversion Logics, and why I will always, offer that testimony.
Sounds like you practice what you preach.
I do.
We are just about out of time. Are there any final thoughts you want to leave with the audience? Any final pieces of advice about maybe the marketing time frame? I know you were saying things go faster now. People are looking for things more quickly with technology. Any just final words of advice for our audience?
Yeah, I think a big question for all of us previously, and kind of one of those big considerations, was, am I including the right tool within my marketing strategy? And it kind of seemed that at that point in time, I hate using this term, but it is so prevalent, but pre-COVID times, it needed to be one or the other. When in reality now, as we can see in testimony to a stat that I gave in regards to digital ad spending continue to increase over the next 4 years, is you should be doing all of it. It should be chat. It should be your conversion modules. It should be your paid search campaign and your social media campaign. Obviously, we know not everybody has the budget to do it all. So let's talk about how we can implement the right strategies and meet your prospects where they are. We waited. We saw those moments where we waited for our prospects to reach us. That has changed, and we need to make sure that we're meeting our prospects where they are and going to them through the right platform. So I would say that my piece of advice is, if you're questioning on, do you need to do it? The answer is yes, you need to do it, and you need to do all of it.
Okay, well, I think those are good marching orders for everybody to really put their plan together, reach out to their prospects where they are, and get started in working with them and continuing to work with them on an
Absolutely.
interactive, ongoing basis.
Pick up the phone, shoot an email, talk to your provider, have the conversation. It's so important.
Great. We are out of time. To everybody who's joined us today, thank you so much for joining us. We will be sending you all notification when the recording is available. So if you want to go back and listen to these steps again and have the visuals in front of you, you will have those. We do hope you'll join us for additional upcoming webinars. And I would once again like to thank our sponsor, Conversion Logics. And Crystal, thank you again so much for this very insightful discussion.
Absolutely. Thank you. It was a pleasure being here. I truly enjoyed it.